What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gate Games Fan TV. How's the form? How are we all getting on? So here we go then. The 2026 National Football League is upon us. It throws in next weekend. And my goodness me, does time just fly? Because it feels like, it's mental. Like the last time I was at a Dublin game, other than the O'Byrne Cup recently, was, half a year ago. But it doesn't even feel like it was that long. It's kind of mental how quickly it all kind of creeps up. But look, this is the annual video I make every year where I predict the entirety of the 2026 National Football League, and it's mainly where I get so many predictions wrong.
It can.
This year I'm confident we're going to get them right. Every single prediction we're going to get. No, we're not going to get every prediction right. Of course, we always get predictions wrong. There's usually one or two very bad ones. I mean, sometimes I do get them right, to be fair. And usually when we react to this video in a couple of months' time, we'll be able to actually see in particular which ones I got right and which ones I got wrong. But yeah, we're going to be going through the entirety of Division 4, 3, 2, and 1. We're going to be going through promotion, relegation, discussing each county, discussing which players to watch out for. We'll also be mentioning how many points I think teams will we get. We'll be focusing in on fixture lists as well in terms of what games that I think certain teams will get points from, because as we know, the fixtures are very important in the National Football League, with the fact that the league is so close to the championship. Some teams towards the end of the league can sometimes maybe ramp it up. Some teams might already have achieved what they wanted to achieve in terms of promotion or survival or anything like that. So I do think the fixtures are worth considering. So we'll start off with Division 4. We'll make our way up to Division 1. If you're new to the channel, hit the like button and subscribe. We're getting very close to 6,000 subscribers. So if you could share this out to your friends and family, just get them to subscribe, even if they don't want it. You know what I mean? Put the phone in front of them, be like, here, subscribe there, will you? Hit the like button, all that crack. The crack that you need to do at this stage. Comment below as well. Let me know your predictions. And look, let's stop waffling. Let's get into it. So the teams that are in Division 4, to remind ourselves, we'll throw the table on the screen right there. These are not the order of my predictions, by the way. So before anyone loses their heads, you can see there you've got Carlow, Leitrim, London Longford, Tipperary, Waterford, Antrim, and Wicklow. So yeah, definitely feels a lot more of an even division. Usually there's like one or two teams you would instantly look at and say they'll be promoted. And look, there is a few teams in there that I think will be up there and teams that won't be. But look, let's crack into it and let's go through my predictions. So I'm going to show you the table straight off the bat, straight into your face. No messing around. There it is right there. Hook yourselves into that. Sounds a bit aggressive there. But yeah, this is my table that I've gone for. We'll run through each team from bottom down, bottom up to first. And I will mention who I think will be the champions of this division as well. You can see there the points that I've given each team as well. I'm going to be mentioning where I think some of those teams will get their points from, and some of the various fixtures I think to watch out for in the division. And it's also worth mentioning, I did record myself, Matthew Hurley, Seamus Brady, and Liam White. We were all in studio together with Cooleen Media. That episode may be out already. If it is, I will share a link to it in the comments a little bit below. There will be a few clips going out on this channel in regards to that as well. And it was the same premise. We went through the entirety of the National Football League. We also previewed the Hurling League, which I'm also going to do an individual video on. The Ladies Football League. There will be a separate preview coming for the Camogie as well. If that video is not out, do keep an eye out on the various different socials on Gaelic Fan TV, Cooleen Media, all the different channels as well. And something else I do want to stress as well in regards to these predictions, if I do have your county lower down the table, do not take it personal. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you do get some people commenting who think I have a bias towards certain counties, or I dislike, a certain group of counties, or I dislike this county, or I hate that county. Realistically, I don't hate any county in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? They're all lovely counties, all lovely places to be. Obviously, I dislike some more than others because of rivalries and everything else. I mean, if I liked every single county, it would be a little bit, it would be a little bit strange if I loved every single county. So, boring really, innit? But do bear that in mind. And these are my predictions as well, but let me know yours in the comments below. So look, we'll start off with 8th place Waterford, who I do have an 8 with 2 points. It's just, I feel a bit bad for Waterford in some ways. I don't really know what we do with Waterford football. Like, they are in a very unusual situation in the sense that they are by far the worst team in the country. There's no question regards to that. You'd probably say London are better than them, maybe New York as well, given what they've done in recent seasons. It's not a slight on Waterford. They are a huge hurling powerhouse. There's no questions in regards to that. There's a huge amount of emphasis on hurling, and you can't really, who do you blame inside Waterford for this? And one thing you would say about Waterford, they don't get battered every game. Last year they were competitive, even though they didn't win a game. Like, they are competitive in a lot of their games. A few years ago, I remember they beat Tipperary and Longford. So, but the worry just with Waterford is that they've had more or less the same squad for the last couple of seasons. They're bringing back an old manager in Effie Fitzgerald, who did well, to be fair, when he was Waterford manager. In that kind of COVID season, he actually got them to a kind of a playoff final as such, to get out of the National Football League. They lost that to Antrim, but the fact they got there was very impressive. But I do worry in the sense that if Waterford were to have a season of hammerings, if they were to lose players because there's nothing coming through, like, I would worry mainly that it could end up like another Kilkenny situation. And I'd love for there to just be some emphasis on football in Waterford, on these kind of counties lower down, even Kilkenny as well. Like, can we get these counties to rise up? Can we help them out if they don't have the resources or the funding? Because it's just not great to see. Look, I've got them with 2 points. Players to watch out for: Stephen Curry, Jason Curry have been 2 players who've been there. Queven Walsh actually looks quite good in the Sigerson Cup actually as well, so he might be one maybe to come in for Waterford as well. In terms of their fixtures, the only game I think they're going to win is actually their first game, funnily enough, against Longford. I think they'll win that. We're not going to run through like all the fixtures because I'll probably mix them up somewhere and look like an idiot. I remember a few years ago I said Louth would beat Louth, so we're not going to do that. I'll just tell you where these counties will get their points from. So I think they'll beat Longford at home. I think they'll lose every other game. Like, if they, even as well, like, they've 3 home games, which is Longford, Wicklow, and Antrim. And Wicklow and Antrim, as you can see there, are 2 teams, the 2 best teams in the division. You'd nearly probably rather get them away from home, because then you could have Carlow at home or London at home, and maybe you might have a chance. But I am going to go for Waterford an 8, 2 points on the board. We've got London in 7th there. Look, London is always kind of a difficult one to predict and call because we don't exactly know. Like, you're looking at their FBD league team, but how many of those players will be involved? They actually played back-to-back games as well, which is very interesting to see. I suppose they were over in Ireland, so it kind of made sense to play a couple of games all at once, so I'm not too sure. But yeah, I've gone for them in 7th. Michael Marsh, still their manager. He must be probably one of the longest serving county managers at this stage, which is very impressive stuff. I think maybe Kieran McGeaney is only there longer than him. Liam Gallagher was very good last season, not the Oasis singer. It would be curious to see him lining out for London. That would be interesting to see. It's not quite him, but he is the man who has been the shining light for London in recent seasons. In terms of their fixtures, I think they're going to beat Tipperary on the opening day as well. Usually on the opening day, that's when you kind of get a lot of surprises and shocks because teams are at different levels. And I remember London beat Wicklow actually at the start of the league last season. So I think there will be a surprise there. I think they'll draw with Leitrim at home as well. And I think they'll beat Waterford at home. So I think home, they'll actually be unbeaten. They've only 3 home games as well: Tipperary, Leitrim, and Waterford. Their away games will be very difficult: Antrim, Carlow, Wicklow, and Longford. They've got Antrim and Carlow towards the end as well. Maybe Antrim away in the final day. Like, maybe Antrim might have promotion already secured. But as you see there with that table, it's very, very tight, isn't it? A little bit at the top. In 6th, we've gone for Longford. This was a difficult one, to be honest with you. Part of me nearly felt a little bit harsh putting Longford this low down the table, but it just doesn't really seem to be working at all. They had a very poor season last year. I don't think they won a single game in the Tailteann Cup as well. It's year 2 for Mike Solan. He seems to be having the same problems that Paddy Christie had. I don't think Paddy Christie is a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination. There seems to be a lot of players consistently opting out of Longford. And I'm not entirely sure as to why that is. Maybe a Longford fan can kind of let us know in the comments in regards to that. But there does seem to be a lot of change within Longford on a consistent basis. Looking at some of their players: Oren Kenny, Matthew Carey. Matthew Carey actually scored 15 points in their only Tailteann Cup win versus Carlow. So they did win a game in the Tailteann Cup last year. Apologies about that. I had it written down here, but it went down my brain. Surprise, surprise. So look, in terms of their fixtures, 5 points on the board. I do think they'll beat London. I think they'll draw with Antrim away. I just have a funny feeling they might, play well in that game for some reason. Wicklow at home on the final day. I think they'll win as well. I think Wicklow will have promotion secured at that very stage. And yeah, it's like I have them above London because of the head-to-head record there. I think they will beat London, so that's why I've got them in 6th. But yeah, there's a lot of it's kind of hard to know with Longford, to be honest with you. A lot of changes. I could be wrong. Look, I do remember 4 or 5 years ago they were pushing on the door to get out of Division 3, but yeah, they're just they are very inconsistent. And I do think a lot of the teams above them as well will be better than what they were last season. And I think that's an important factor to remember here. In 5th, we've gone for Carlow, managed by Joe Murphy, who I think did a brilliant job, actually, with Carlow, considering he took over halfway through the season after the whole Shane Curran thing and, you know, the Carlow players having to come out and sort of make a statement themselves. A bit of a mess, to be honest with you, was Carlow football last season, you know, in that kind of first part of the season. But they did very well. Look, they had some big wins in the Tailteann Cup, didn't they, beat Fermanagh? Maybe having them as low as 5th is a little bit harsh. Look, as you can see there, I only think there'll be 3 points in the difference between them and Wicklow. So I don't think there'll be much really in it. I like some of their players, Mikey Bambrick, Ross Dunphy. I just think there is a bit of inconsistency. And I think their fixture list at the start is very difficult, actually. They have Antrim away at the start, Wicklow at home, you know, and I feel like Carlow is a bit of a, like a lot of these teams, they're confidence teams. Do you know what I mean? If they can get on a run, you never quite know. But in terms of where I think the points will come from, I think they'll draw with Tipperary away on the 3rd match day. I think they'll beat Waterford. I think they'll beat Longford. I think they'll beat London as well. But I do think they'll slip up to Leitrim on the final day, which, you know, will probably cost them finishing 3rd, in my opinion. And yeah, look, their fixture list is not bad, though, to be fair. Like, to have London at home, Waterford at home, Wicklow at home. Like, maybe getting Wicklow early on, you might maybe get something from that game, given the fact that Wicklow started the league quite poorly last season. So an interesting point to remember, but with Carlow, but I've got them in 5th. In 4th, I've gone for Tipperary, also with 7 points. I actually think they'll draw with Carlow, but they'll have a better score difference, so that'll be the reason why they will finish above them. A lot of change in Tipperary in recent years. We do obviously have to mention the tragic passing of Philly Ryan a few months ago. We don't know. You can't measure the effect that's going to have on the players and the squad and everyone else. And without question, you would imagine it would have a big effect on the players losing a manager. And obviously a very tough job for Niall Fitzgerald coming in under these circumstances as well. In terms of players to come in, what I would say about Tipperary is that although they have regressed hugely in recent seasons from, you know, the team that won a Munster title, 6 years ago, 6 years ago in December. Mad feeling that, you know, saying that was 6 years ago sounds a little bit. I mean, it was 5 years ago, really, wasn't it? Given the fact that it was in December of 2020. Look, I do think they've young players coming through, and that's what I would say about Tipperary. Although they've lost like Mickey Quinlivan and a lot, you know, Connor Sweeney and these lads. Sean O'Connor is a great young player. Daithí Hogan was very good with the 20s. A lot of players in and around the Sigerson. In terms of their fixtures, I was alluding to it there. I do think they'll beat Antrim on the 2nd match day at home. I think they'll draw with Carlow. I think they'll beat Longford, and I think they'll also beat Waterford. I think where they'll slip up, as I said, I think they'll lose to London on the opening day. It's a difficult first game, to be honest with you. There's pressure on you. London, a lot of the time, get points on their opening weekend. Like, I remember I think they beat Wexford on the opening weekend a couple of years ago as well. So they're a tricky team to play on the opening weekend. Drawn with Carlow as well at home. If they could win that, they might maybe, well, I suppose they go up to 4th, but or they'd stay in 4th actually, wouldn't they? Given they go up to 8 points. But look, they won't be far away. Is Carlow or is Tipperary? But I do think they'll miss out. We move into the top 3 then, and look, I think for the majority of this season, Antrim, Wicklow, and Leitrim will be the sides occupying the top 3. I've gone for Leitrim in 3rd. I do think they'll miss out. Like, it is interesting. Some people would probably have Leitrim lower in this table. And when you do watch the episode we record in studio on Cooley Media, a lot of the lads had Leitrim lower. Bit of a spoiler there. I was actually probably the ones who are more kind to Leitrim, having them in 3rd position. Look, what I would say about Leitrim is they do have the players to get promoted, in my opinion. Barry McNulty's a phenomenal player. You've got Paul Honeyman coming through. Tom Pryor is very good as well. But there is that sort of elephant in the room of Leitrim in terms of what happened in the league last season. I mean, forfeiting a game, Stephen Poacher coming out and doing almost like a media tour. And like, Stephen Poacher is, you know, primarily known as a defensive coach. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was when he was involved with Carlo and Turlock O'Brien, like that, he was the defensive coach there. He's been very big on defensive systems in the past. And look, I've often said before in the past, I don't really have a big issue with defensive systems, mainly because of the fact that I like different teams having different styles. What I would say though is that with the rules now, those defensive systems just don't really work, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to progress you too far up the league and everything else. And that's the problem, I think, that Leitrim are facing. And look, there is a bit of pressure on Leitrim as well because of that, because of what happened last season. Look, after the league, I did think they were impressive. Like, they were good against Mayo. I remember in that game, they actually played quite well. They did win a game in the Tailteann Cup as well. I think there'll be pressure on them, but I just don't trust that they'll be consistent enough. And I do think there'll be slip-ups, ultimately, which is why I think they'll miss out. In terms of where the points will be coming from for Leitrim, I think they'll beat Waterford on the second day. And I actually think their start to the league will be quite poor. Like, they play Wicklow away on the opening day. I think they'll lose that game, unfortunately. I think they'll draw with London away as well. I think that's a tricky one. Antrim at home, I think they'll get beat. I think they'll win one of their opening 4 games, which will be against Waterford, but it'll be towards the end of the league where they'll pick it up. I actually think they'll win 3 on the bounce against Tip away, Longford home, and Carlow away. But ultimately, the damage will be done, and Leitrim will miss out on promotion. Look, I do like Leitrim. I would like to see them promoted. I want to see them progress and everything else. But I don't really trust the sort of management there and everything else. And yeah, I think Leitrim will miss out. Moving into the top 2 then, and we do have Wicklow in second, first of all, which a lot of people would probably have Wicklow first, but bit of a spoiler, I do still think Wicklow will win the Division 4 final. Look, in terms of Wicklow, I mean, Oisin McConville staying on for another year is absolutely massive. I mean, there's pressure on Wicklow as well. I mean, the fact they weren't promoted last season, which was a bit of a mad one. Like, they've had very good championship seasons in recent years. Semi-finals of the Tailteann Cup last year, beating Westmeath in the process. You think to the season previous, they beat Westmeath in the Leinster Championship as well. Should have beat Kildare in the quarterfinals. They were a kick of a ball. Remember that open goal that they missed? I mean, they were so close to getting to a Leinster semi-final for the first time in donkey's years. And they would have been playing in Croke Park as well, which would have been absolutely brilliant to see from a Wicklow perspective. But look, I do think they're progressing. Like, I like the look of some of their young players, and Kevin Quinn and Owen Darcy, Mark Kenny. Like, they are progressing very, very strongly. Dean Healy's been a consistent sort of starlet forward for Wicklow in recent years. And look, I think Wicklow will get the bulk of their work done at the start of the league. I think they have to be targeting the start of the league in terms of points. Like, they've got Leitrim at home, Carlow away, Waterford away, and London at home when they're opening 4 games. Like, Wicklow should be winning all those games, in my opinion. And I think, the bulk of their journey in terms of promotion will already be done. It will take the pressure off Antrim away, which I think they will lose. I think they will be Tipperary at home, and I think they'll lose at Longford on the final day, having already secured promotion, in my opinion. So, look, there is pressure on Wicklow. They are progressing. I honestly do think Wicklow, if they were in Division 3, would be good enough to stay up as well. You know what I mean? I think they can break that. They've kind of gone from 4 to 3 and, consecutive years before getting re-promoted last season. So, I think it's a big year for Wicklow. I think they're definitely a dark horse for the Tailteann Cup as well. And look, maybe it will be Oisin McConville last season. So I think you want to get the most out of that, I think. And we've got Antrim in first with 11 points on the board. Look, Antrim were relegated from Division 3 last season. They were a consistent Division 3 team, really. And at one stage, they were nearly actually, knocking on the door in terms of promotion. They do have a new manager coming in, Mark Doran, who replaces Andy McEntee. Mark Doran had worked with Slot Neal in recent seasons, so he comes in with a good track record. Looking at some of their key players to watch out for, Dominic McInhill has been very good. I like the likes of Roy McQuillan, good young player. Mark Jordan at wing-back's very good as well. Roy Murray's been a sort of consistent footballer for Antrim in recent seasons. And look, I think their quality is too high, in my opinion, for this division. I think they're too strong, and they should have more than enough to navigate their way through a lot of these games. My only worry would be with Antrim going down to Division 4. Sometimes when you get relegated from Division 3, it can take you a couple of years to sort of reinvigorate yourself and everything else. New management as well, maybe a new style under Mark Doran, so we'll see. But in terms of their fixtures, look, I do think Antrim will win 5 games and draw 1. Their only defeat in the league phase will be against Tipperary away, in my opinion. But I think they'll beat Carlow, they'll draw with Longford, they'll beat Leitrim, they'll beat Wicklow, they'll beat Waterford, and they'll beat London. Like that fixture list towards the end of the season as well, in my opinion, is very, very favourable in terms of Waterford and London. And Carlow at home is a nice game to start with. Leitrim away might be tricky, but I think they'll have enough. And Wicklow at home as well, I think will be a big game. And having that home advantage in Corrigan Park as well, it's always, it's always worth considering that. And look, I do think Wicklow will go up as champions. I think in Croke Park they will get the better of Antrim in my opinion. And yeah, look, I think there's very little between Antrim and Wicklow. I think Wicklow haven't played in Croke Park last season against Fermanagh. That was obviously a huge moment for them getting to Croke Park and everything else. And yeah, I think with the McConville effect and everything else that goes with it, I think Wicklow will go up as champions. So that's Division 4. Let's take a look at Division 3. And as you can see, I mean, there is very, very little in my predictions between a lot of these teams other than down. There's actually a bigger gap between first and second than there is from second down to eighth. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to show the tables straight out the gate and actually show the points on the screen as well. Because sometimes when you predict a team to finish bottom, people employ that they're, the worst team by a considerable distance. And sometimes teams that get relegated aren't even bad teams, as we've seen in recent seasons. Sometimes teams that get relegated are unlucky. Do you know what I mean? And you could see that there. I mean, like with Wexford and Laois, there's very, very little between them and Clare, Westmeath, Sligo, and a few of the others. But again, look, we'll go in the order from 8th up to 1st, starting off with Laois. Look, it's going to be tough for Laois. I think the quality in this division, I mean, there's a lot of teams at a very even spectrum, but it's just kind of hard to kind of see. Like, look, I think that, I have them with 4 points, so I think they'll win 2 games, but I just don't really think the consistency will be there. Like, they are managed by Justin McNulty, who I have kind of sung his praises in recent years. I actually backed Laois to get promoted from Division 3 last season. I thought they'd go straight back up, but they were a lot of players left the panel. And I think a few more have left the panel as well from what I have heard. Look, in terms of their key players, they've got Evan O'Carroll, who's a brilliant forward. Killian Roach is brilliant in goal as well. I think he was probably the top scoring goalkeeper last season across league and championship. Brilliant on 2-pointers as well. I've seen him in the flesh actually in the Old Burn Cup recently versus Dublin, and he is a very, very top class goalkeeper. There's no question about that. You've got Mark Barry, Brian Byrne as well. I just think with Laois, they just don't have some of the scoring power that other teams have. It does look like it could be Justin McNulty's last season as well, which usually in the last season there can be a bit of drop of form. I just think their fixtures as well are very difficult. Like, they play Limerick at the start at home. I think they'll lose that. That'll be difficult. Wexford away, I think they'll lose. Hence why I think Wexford will finish above them on the head-to-head. I think their only wins will be Sligo at home and Westmeath at home. They play Fermanagh and Down towards the end as well. And yeah, look, very, very hard to call, to be honest with you. Very difficult. Laois could stay up. Like, I honestly do believe between 8th to 2nd, you can make a case for anyone to get promoted and anyone to get relegated. And I think it was after doing out the fixtures where we sort of ended up with this with Laois finishing down in the bottom. So, and for Wexford as well, I just think they lack the scoring power. They don't have, one thing you would give Laois credit for is they have players who can kick 2-pointers, and Evan O'Carroll and in terms of Killian Roach as well. I don't think Wexford really have too many players there. Like, I mean, like, it is interesting with Wexford. Like, they have been able to get big wins in recent seasons against, Division 3 teams and everything else. Remember, they beat Offaly one year, a couple of years in the championship. They were able to get wins versus Laois as well. Like, and when they're on it and when they're beating teams, they can put a team to a sword. You know what I mean? Score difference might potentially benefit them in regards to that. But equally as well, they can get hammered, can go the other way. They very much are a confidence team, in my opinion. John Hegarty's been there a while, and we saw some great players like Mark Rossiter, Dara Brooks, and Owen Nolan come through the ranks for Wexford football. But yeah, in terms of their fixtures, their only wins for me will be Laois at home and Westmeath at home. It is interesting. I'm backing both Wexford and Laois to beat Westmeath, but so much is Westmeath and their inconsistency. But we'll get onto them in a couple of minutes. So yeah, I think Wexford will just struggle ever so slightly in regards to that. In 6th, I've gone for Clare. Look, some people might be surprised by having Clare down in 6th. I will be honest with you, when I was doing my research and sort of like, if I had have predicted the table without doing any research, without doing any preparation for this video, I might have put Clare being as a side to be promoted. But then when you actually look back, they've lost a lot of players going into this season. They've no Keelan Sexton. Peter Keane stepped away as well, which I thought was a little bit strange because I thought, Clare would have been one of the contenders for promotion. And look, ultimately, one thing worth mentioning, I think the point is important to mention here. 2 points separating 6th and 2nd, lads. I don't think Clare will be a million miles away from promotion. I think there's times in the season where they will be 2nd, where they will be 3rd. But I do think ultimately, with a good amount of change, that will, ultimately cost them a little bit. Look, they still have key players in Ika Maguero, Aaron Griffin, Emmett McMahon, but they are, they've no Keelan Sexton, Kieran Downs, Eamon Tuberty, Rory McMahon, Darren Nagel, and Oren Cahill are all the players who've left Clare there. And a lot of those players would have featured in the first team as well. So it is quite a big blow. They do still have Owen Cleary in the side as well, from what I've heard. So that's going to be huge. And in terms of their fixtures, I think their wins will come away to Fermanagh. I think they'll beat Laois at home, and I think they will beat Wexford at home as well. I think the other games will be a loss. I think playing down at the start of the league will be tough. I think Sligo away on the final day will be tough as well. Limerick away is another tough game as well, like a bit of a rivalry there. So I've got Westmeath with 6 points as well. So a lot of the same points really apply to Westmeath. They have a new manager as well in Mark McHugh coming in. They have also had players leave the panel, Sam McCartan, Kieran Martin as well. In recent seasons, they've lost the likes of Roland O'Toole, John Heslin. A lot of that crop that was there with Westmeath that won the Tailteann Cup is very much left. They still have Luke Loughlin, Denon Baker. Seen Bodu Soya was back in the squad as well for the Tailteann Cup, or for the Tailteann Cup for the pre-season O'Byrne Cup. So look, at least that's good to see, in fairness. But they're just very inconsistent, lads. They're very, very inconsistent in terms of points, results, and everything else. You can never quite predict what they're going to do. In terms of Westmeath's fixtures, then I do think they'll draw with Sligo on the opening day. They'll beat Clare. They'll also draw with Laois, and they'll beat Limerick, leading them with 6 points. They will only lose 3 games: Wexford, Fermanagh, and Down, in my opinion. And just as a matter of fact, just as I'm going through it there, Laois should be on 5 points then, because I've gone with a draw. Oh dear. Oh no. We're going to have to cancel the... No, I'm only joking. So I guess Laois do go to 7th. Happy fucking days. When you know what? You're still getting relegated anyway.
He's done it! That is a foul!
But yeah, look, I think there'll be 2 draws in there for Westmeath, and I think their win versus Clare is ultimately what has them above Clare in the head-to-head. We've got Sligo in 4th. Look, there'll be a point separating the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd there. Like very, very little between a lot of them. Like in terms of Sligo, new management coming in, Eamon O'Hara and Desi Sloyan. They've obviously had huge underage success in recent seasons. Canis Mulligan, Pat Spillane Jr., a few others kind of making the breakthrough as well. Whilst you do have established players like Noel Murphy and Paddy O'Connor. Look, underage success doesn't always translate into senior. I do feel like sometimes you need a few teams to kind of work off. You need sort of your base in terms of your senior players there as well to be able to, support that. I think when you're bringing through younger players, you want to bring them into a culture and an environment that's already successful, or, players that are already kind of doing the right thing so that bad examples don't follow and everything else. In terms of their fixtures, I think they'll beat Limerick. I think they'll beat Wexford as well. They'll beat Clare on the final day, and they'll draw with Westmeath on the opening day. I think their defeats will come to Fermanagh, Laois, and Down, the second last game. I mean, one kind of common trend you'll see from kind of going through these fixtures is I think everyone will kind of beat everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think, the fact that Sligo lose to Laois, who have got down and, 7th now, I think there's just so little between a lot of them, and it is so hard to call. And I've kind of put everyone kind of beating everyone, because I honestly do think that's what happens, and we've saw evidence of that in recent seasons. Look, their home games are Clare, Down, Limerick, and Fermanagh. Like, there's a few kind of tricky home ones in there. So, look, Sligo will have a solid season. In my opinion, I think they'll be massive contenders. They nearly got relegated last season as well. I don't think they'll want to make the same mistake. But I think the home fixtures will be crucial from a Sligo perspective. Fermanagh have also got with 7 points as well. New manager coming in there in Declan Bonner. There's a lot of new managers coming in across the board with some various different counties here in Division 3. You've got Limerick you've got Fermanagh with a new manager, Sligo new manager, Westmeath new manager, Clare new manager. Like, so many new managers kind of coming into the fold there, and that is an important point worth remembering. But look, Declan Bonner coming in, it's an interesting one with Declan Bonner. Like, he did well when he was managing Donegal, but he had that Donegal team at its absolute prime, its absolute peak. Like, a lot of people forget Michael Murphy, Paddy McBrearty were still youngish players when they won the All-Ireland for Donegal back in 2012. Like, that was still kind of a relatively young team. They were all in their prime though when Declan Bonner was there, and I do go back to to 2020 when they lost the Ulster final to Cavan. Like, Donegal that season, I think Dublin would have still beaten them in the All-Ireland semi-final. Donegal were very, very good that year, and they certainly would have given a better game than Cavan did anyway. Players there who've been very sort of prominent in the last couple of seasons: Ultan Kelm, Conor Love, Ryan Lyons, Darren McGurn. You know, I remember when they were in Division 2 a couple of years ago, they were very unlucky, weren't they, to get relegated, and they actually competed very well in that division. So look, they'll be right up there. In terms of their results, I think they'll beat Wexford, I think they'll beat Sligo, I think they'll draw with Westmeath, and they'll beat Laois. And ultimately, I do think there'll be inconsistencies across the board. But one fixture I do want to highlight, Limerick away on the final day. Like, I've got Limerick there with 8 points. I think it will go down to that, lads. And I think Limerick having the home advantage, Fermanagh having to slog all the way down to Limerick, especially when you've got the Ulster Championship coming up in a couple of weeks. I think Limerick will do it. I really do. And mentioning Limerick, look, it probably is a bit of a surprise to some people to have them there in second with 8 points. Believe me, when I was doing out the fixtures and I had Limerick in second, I was kind of thinking, do I want to revisit these fixtures? Do I want to do this again? Because I didn't expect to actually end up putting Limerick in second position. I did always think they'd stay up, but it is a bold shout given the fact that Division 4 last season, they were obviously promoted, came up as champions, though, it must be said. And look, they were in the Tailteann Cup final as well. And let's not forget the last time Limerick were promoted from Division 4 to 3, they went straight up to 2. Things went very bad after that, but they did go straight up again. It's a weird one with Limerick. It's very hard to know because for a couple of years then after that, they were very poor. Their last season in Division 3, I think they lost almost every game. They might have won maybe one game in there, but they were very, very poor. And things were very bad for Limerick for a couple of years there until Jimmy Lee was able to come in and really kind of steady the ship there. In terms of their fixtures, I think it's the home games that will be absolutely massive from a Limerick perspective. I think they'll beat Laois away from home on the opening day. I do think they'll lose to Down on the second game, but I think they'll beat Wexford at home, they'll be Clare at home, and they'll be Fermanagh at home as well. One thing worth mentioning, they've got a lot of the teams around them at home, and they do play Westmeath away and Sligo away, which I think they'll lose, but ultimately I do think Limerick will have enough. And Limerick do have some great players in there as well. Like, you've James Naughton, who scored 4 goals, I remember, in one game last season. You've got Emma Richter, Danny Neville, Ian Corbett. I think they're very well established, and I think they will do enough. And then I've got Down in first with 14 points, winning every game. Look, winning every game in the league is very tough, and I think they will go up as champions as well. So they'll complete the absolute set in terms of winning 7 games and then winning the final as well. I actually can't remember the last time a team did that. I remember Wexford did it last season when they won 7 games in Division 4, but they did lose the final to Limerick. It is an unusual one. I'm still not entirely sure how Down ended up in this division, to be honest with you, because like when you look at their firepower, their attacking power, when you look at what they did last season as well, like they nearly beat Galway in the championship. They were very, very unlucky in regards to that, and definitely was a massive setback falling down to Division 3. I think they got relegated with 6 points. It was one of them where they actually probably still weren't a million miles off promotion in the end, given how Division 2 ended up. Conor Laverty is still there. I think he's into his 3rd, 4th season now. Like, he's been in charge of Down for quite a while. Very much is a long-term project. You've got great sort of under-20 players coming through in recent seasons. Oran Murdoch, Oisin Savage, Donald Guinness. You've also got sort of standout players like Pat Haver and Roy McGill. They're very, very strong Down. They're definitely a side to keep an eye on in terms of the All-Ireland series. I do think winning Division 3, as far as I know, should put them in the Sam Maguire as well, which is absolutely where they belong, given the fact that they got out of the group stage last season. Not only that, they won the group as well, from what I remember. So Down football is in very good steads, in my opinion. You do wonder, can they take that extra step, though, in terms of, pushing to get out of Division 2 next season, or maybe kind of pushing some of the big boys as well? Because when you look at teams in Ulster who have made the rise, look, Armagh have been in this situation before, Derry have been in this situation before in terms of playing Division 3 football. It's about taking that next step, and I think that's what we want to see from Down. There's no point going through their fixtures because I think they'll win every game, but they'll be Clare at home, Limerick away, Westmeath home, Wexford away, Fermanagh home, Sligo away, and Laois at home. Maybe there could be a slip-up at the end of the league, given the fact that promotion will already be wrapped up. Maybe they could lose to Laois at the end, who knows? But I think Down will win every game. And then we have Division 2, and I suppose for the Meath football fans, you can break out the champagne because you will win Division 2, in my opinion. I predicted you to get relegated last season So I do apologise for that, because that was a bad prediction by myself. But I ate that humble pie watching Meath have a better season than Dublin, in my opinion, in terms of championship and league, everything really, to be honest. But look, we'll speak about Meath a little bit later, because I think they will be very strong again. But as you can see there again, a few more gaps between the counties in Division 2, as you'll see there. But I do think relegation will be quite close. We've got Cavan in 8th, and I will be honest with you, there's a part of me that does feel like, when I'm looking back at predictions, this could be one that I regret, but I'm just not sure about Cavan. There seems to be a lot of negativity around Cavan football right now when you look at Twitter and everything else, in terms of the new manager who's come in. They've got Dermot McCabe in from Westmeath, and Dermot McCabe is a Cavan man through and through, played for the Cavan footballers many years ago. I think he was part of the Ulster squad, the team that won the Ulster back in 97, was it? Part of the development and everything else. I don't know the whole ins and outs as to why Cavan people don't want them, because I don't really get it, to be honest. Look, their fixture list is very difficult as well. Paddy Lynch will be back. He has had injury problems. He will be key. Aside from that, though, they don't have a huge amount of players, though, that can contribute. And I do think the standard in this division as well has gotten better. Like, I think Kildare have gotten better. I think Cork have gotten a few players back, so that they should improve. Louth, I think, will probably be around the same level, but even at that, that's still a good enough level for this division. Derry, Tyrone and Meath, I think, will all be better as well. And I think Offaly will have a bit more of a point to prove in this division, because everyone will expect them to go down easily, and I think they might prove a few people wrong. A bit like when Mickey Hart's Louth did something similar a couple of years ago. Fixture list is difficult as well. Like, they've only got 3 home games, Louth, Kildare and Meath, and like, they'll be relying hugely on the opening game versus Cork, because Cork are traditional slow starters in the league. Maybe they could get something there. I've got Offaly in 7th. Look, one thing about Offaly, I think what would say about Cavan is that when things are going badly, they could get absolutely battered. You know, there could be hiding, there'll be negativity around Cavan. I don't think that will ever apply to Offaly, no matter where they are in the league. Like, even if they lost every game, I still think there'd be a lot of, positivity among Offaly supporters, unless they were hammered in absolutely every game. Maybe then that positivity would go away. But look, there's a few points worth mentioning here. I think Mickey Hart, things were bad with Derry. I do think he's still quite an underrated manager in many ways. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. He did a phenomenal job with Louth when they came up to Division 2 a couple of years ago in similar circumstances. Young players coming through and everything else. Very similar here in terms of Offaly. You've got Cormac Egan, Keith O'Neill, Jack Bryant, probably all coming into their prime. It is worth mentioning Declan Kelly is the joint manager with Mickey Hart. He was a part of that under-20 side as well. And I think last season was a phenomenal year for Offaly, promoted from Division 3 as champions. Lost to Kildare in the Tailteann Cup, the team that eventually went on to win it. I think if Offaly win that game, they also win the Tailteann Cup as well. So a lot of positivity around Offaly football. They won't have Rory McNamee. Noel McNamee won't be coming back as well. He retired in 2024. So there is a bit more positivity. But in saying that, still think they will go down, mainly because of the quality, to be honest. I just think Kildare, Cork, Louth, the teams above them, will just have a little bit more. Their fixture list at the start is going to be absolutely crucial. They play Louth at home on the opening day. And the Louth players will get their crack at Mickey Hart as well. That's going to be interesting to see. I do think they'll beat Cork on the 3rd day, so they'll get the victory there. And I do think they'll beat Cavan as well. I think they'll lose to Meath on the final day. Like, their home games are huge. They're Cork home, Cavan home, Meath home. If Meath are already promoted, could Offaly maybe sneak the victory versus Meath on the final day. And yeah, like, their away fixtures are very difficult. Tyrone, Derry, Kildare, but their home fixtures are favourable. They have the teams you want to play at home. In terms of Meath, Cavan, Cork and Louth. And even looking at those fixtures as well, like, I think it could happen. Like, Offaly could do this. We've got Kildare in 6th. Look, Kildare is a hard one to predict, to be honest with you. A hard one to call, because last season, look, they won the Tailteann Cup, and fair play to them for doing that. They achieved ultimately what they set out to do at the start of the year. They got promoted from Division 3. Bit of positivity back in Kildare football. And look, they were competitive enough, I thought, versus Louth as well in that Leinster semi-final. And I don't think the gap between them and Louth, Meath, and even Dublin is that big, to be honest with you. They are a hard one to predict, though, because when we saw them against teams of the level of Division 2 last season, they struggled. They lost to Offaly twice in the league. They did beat them in the Tailteann Cup, albeit barely. And they did lose to Louth, obviously, in the Leinster Championship as well Last time they were in Division 2 was an absolute disaster. So they'll want to right the wrongs of that. But look, I do think they'll do enough to stay up, in my opinion. They'll just about do enough. I think their home fixtures will be key. Offaly at home, Derry at home, and Louth at home as well. They've got Meath at home towards the end of the season, so that could be huge. Their away fixtures will be difficult. Tyrone away from home at the start. Cork away, Cavan away, so will be difficult there. But in terms of their wins, I think they'll beat Offaly at home. I think they'll beat Derry at home as well. And I also think they'll beat Louth at home on the final day. They are a confidence team, and if they start badly, like if they were to lose to Offaly in the second game, and then you've got Derry, Cavan, and Meath to follow, like things could get ugly for Kildare, but I do think they'll have enough. Same applies to Cork. I was saying to Matthew on that, in studio show about Cork football that I'm not convinced about Cork right now, and I'm not sure. They do kind of remind me of a team like Meath for a good couple of years under Andy McAtee, where they're not improving, they're not getting worse, but sometimes when you're doing that, like you can have a bad season like what Kildare did a couple of years ago. You can start really badly and things can kind of go sour. But one thing we know about Cork is that they're brilliant against better teams. Like they're the type of team that could beat Tyrone but lose to Kildare. Do you know what I mean? We see that very often with Cork. Like their performances against Kerry in the championship in recent seasons, like they've pushed. I know Meath actually beat Kerry in the championship last season, but Cork have pushed Kerry closer than a lot of other teams have. If Cork can find a bit of consistency, I think they'd get out of this division, but they're just very inconsistent a lot of the time, which is why I just don't really trust them. They do have Stephen Sherlock coming back in, which is huge. I mean, he scored, 17 points versus Dingle or something like that? Like, that was absolutely insane. Ian Maguire is a player I like around the middle. Brian Hurley as well. You've got young footballers like Mark Cronin, Connor Corbett. Like, I think with Cork as well, it's one of them where I feel like with Cork, you're waiting for them to take that next step. Is finishing fifth acceptable now for Cork, given that that's kind of been what they've been doing over the last couple of seasons? There will be 2 draws in there. I think they'll draw with Cavan at home and they'll draw with Tyrone away from home on the final day. The head-to-head record versus Kildare means they finish 5th. They could beat Tyrone on the final day, given the fact that I do think Tyrone could already have promotion signed, sealed, and delivered. I think they will be fine, but I just don't think they're consistent enough to get promoted. We've got Louth in 4th. Some people will be sort of predicting Louth to get relegated. I've seen a few shouts in terms of Louth getting relegated and everything else, which, to be honest, I don't really understand, because they are Leinster champions. Gavin Devlin has come in as the new manager. Yes, they don't have Jared Brennan, but lads, when they lost Mickey Hart and Jared Brennan came in, they were still very, very competitive, weren't they? Do you know what I mean? They were still, they got even better. And Gavin Devlin's been in the background whilst all this has been happening, by the way. He's been the head of the academy. He did go to Derry with Mickey Hart for that one brief season, but then he came back to Louth. Senior players who've now won something as well in terms of the Leinster Football Championship, like Samuel Roy, like Tommy Durnan. But you have the young players that are all coming through, like Tyg McDonald, Kieran McCardle. You have other younger players who've looked brilliant in recent seasons as well, like Craig Lennon, Ryan Burns. Louth football will be fine, and I do think Louth will get up to Division 1 at some stage in the next kind of couple of years. It could even be this season. I wouldn't be entirely against it. In terms of their predictions, or in terms of their fixtures, I think they'll beat Offaly away. I think they'll beat Cork at home, draw with Derry, but I think they will beat Cavan away from home. Their defeats will come against Meath, Tyrone, and Kildare. They're better, in my opinion, than Cork, Kildare, Offaly, Cavan, but I don't think the gap is hugely better. Yeah, we'll go with Louth in 4th. In 3rd, we've gone for Derry. Look, as you'll see there, I think there'll be very, very little between Derry, Tyrone, and Meath. And look, ultimately, I think a lot of it will go down to some of the individual fixtures between some of these teams. It's very hard to call. Very, very hard to call between a lot of them. I think with Derry, there's a lot of question marks over them still. Do you know what I mean? Like, Derry could even be further down the table. They've got Kieran Mina back, which is huge. Kieran Mina was the man who sort of took charge when everything happened that happened with Rory Gallagher. But it is worth mentioning that Kieran Mina took over a team that was ready to win. Kieran Mina didn't have to change anything. He just had to keep things going the way that they were. And since then, things have been terrible for Derry. They haven't won a game in normal time since they beat Westmeath in the summer of 2024. Like, they didn't win a single game last year. I just don't think you can turn it back on with the flick of a switch. And that's why I think Derry are more likely to drop more points than Tyrone and Meath, in my opinion. But look, ultimately in 3rd with 9 points, like 9 points in that'll be enough to get you promoted from my Division 3 table, with Limerick and 8 points. So, sometimes it just depends on how other teams are as well. And I do think Meath and Tyrone will be better. And I still think Derry will show a lot of improvement this season. In terms of their fixtures, I think they will lose to Meath on the opening day. Like their fixtures at the start, by the way, they've got Meath and Tyrone in their opening 2 games. I do actually think they'll beat Tyrone, but I think they'll lose to Kildare, they'll beat Offaly, they'll beat Cork, they'll draw with Louth, and they'll beat Cavan. We've got Tyrone with 10 points. Some people might be surprised that I've got Tyrone maybe lower than Meath in the table there, but do you know what the thing is with Tyrone? They have a very young squad, young players kind of coming through in the likes of Owen McElhone and Rory McCullough, Shea O'Hare. You've got young players in there. You've got established players in Kieran McGeary, Darren McCurry. They have a huge amount of players, and I think Malachy O'Rourke, like it's a good headache to have, but he's going to have to try and put all the players together whilst a lot of these players are playing Sigerson. So if Tyrone get into the league final here, they'll play a week later against Armagh in the opening round of the preliminary rounds. Now, if you're asking me what matters more to Tyrone, a Division 2 league final or a opening game versus Armagh, they're going to tell you the opening day versus Armagh all day long. So that's why I think Tyrone will start the league very, very strong, but there will be a bit of inconsistency towards the end because I do think Tyrone will start to turn their attention towards the Ulster Championship. There will be no Conor Moyler. There will be no Peter Hart as well. So 2 very experienced players there that won't be in the team. But in terms of their fixtures, I think they'll beat Kildare on the opening day. Do think there'll be a slip-up versus Derry, but then I think they'll beat Cavan, they'll beat Louth, they'll beat Offaly, and there'll be 2 final day draws against Meath and Cork. But ultimately, that will still be enough to see them finish second. We've then got Meath in first. Look, there is some interesting question marks over Meath. I mean, second-year syndrome, I do think is a thing, and we have seen that in recent seasons, and I think it could be something that happens again. However, considering how strong they were last season, beating Dublin, beating Kerry, beating Galway, you know, if they had beaten one of them teams, you could say maybe it was a little bit of a fluke, but considering they've won all 3, I just don't really think that's a thing. And like I think they just have an incredible amount of players and options in terms of attack, from Gordon Morris, Owen Frayne, Rory Kinsella, Connor Duke, Matthew Costello. Could you have Sean Emanuel to come back in? Sean Rafferty, a fullback, was absolutely outstanding as well. This is definitely the best that Meath football has looked probably in about 20 years, to be honest with you. Like, this is a very, very strong Meath football team, but it is important now for Meath football to capitalise on these players that they have, to capitalise on the success that they had last season. I know they didn't win anything, I know they lost the Leinster final, but whilst you have players moving in the right direction, you don't want players to get tempted by a move to the AFL or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So I think getting up to Division 1 is absolutely crucial for Meath. I also think winning a Leinster title is going to be huge for Meath football as well in terms of getting silverware. I do think Meath are on track to win an All-Ireland in the next couple of years. It pains me to say it as a Dublin supporter. It's not something I want to say, but I think it's possible because I've seen this story before with other teams, with the likes of Armagh. They could get to a couple of finals. You know, it's not a guarantee. Winning an All-Ireland is very, very difficult. You need to sort of go on the right trajectory. And that's why I think this National Football League campaign needs to be treated very, very seriously by them. I do think they'll go up as champions as well. Look, I will say this, though. I do think Tyrone are a better team than Meath. I will say that. Again, it's the fact that Tyrone have a game against Armagh a week later. And then we have the big one, Division 1, right there in front of us. And as you'll see, lads, the tightest of them all. 5 points separating 8th and 1st. We've got 3 teams on 5 points, 2 teams on 8 points, 1 team on 6, another team on 9, another team on 10. Very, very hard division to call. And again, I just think with Division 1, everyone kind of beats everyone. Division 1 is such a weird one, to be honest with you, because I feel like there are certain counties who maybe, you know, if they get into a league final, happy days. But if they don't get into it, it's not the end of the world. And a lot of that is because of what is to come in the provincial championships. You know, look, a lot of people will look towards Roscommon to finish bottom. And look, ultimately, I do have them finishing bottom, but I don't think it will be as cut and dry as people think. And as you'll see there, I actually think it will go down to score difference. Mark O'Dowd comes in as the new manager, succeeding Davy Burke. Jason Sherlock's actually in the backroom team as well. One thing we will say about Roscommon, when they do get a new manager in, there's always a bounce. There was a bounce with Kevin McStay. There was a bounce with Davy Burke. And I'm expecting something similar to happen here again, in my opinion, where I think they'll get a couple of results in this division and a couple of results this season in the championship as well that will surprise people. Kieran Murtagh has retired, but they do still have German Murtagh, Keane McKeown, and the Smith. One big thing worth mentioning, though, is the Bridges lads. So they won't have Ben O'Carroll, Bobby Nugent, Brian Stack all in the early part of the league. You would imagine Shane McGinley will come in. Strokestown were beaten in the intermediate semi-finals, so Shane McGinley should have a bit of space to come into the side. Very good with the 20s in recent seasons, so this could be a big year from his perspective. In terms of their fixtures, they have a tough start, lads. They play Kerry, Monaghan and Armagh in their opening 3 games. In terms of the games that I think they'll win, I do think they'll beat Armagh on the 3rd day. I remember they beat Armagh in their opening season under Davy Burke, and I think they'll do something similar again. I think they'll draw with Galway, and I actually think they'll beat Mayo on the final day. Roscommon will already have been relegated, but they'll basically be dragging Mayo down with them, which I know a lot of Roscommon fans will absolutely love. And I know Mayo fans are probably looking at this video and thinking, you've predicted us to get relegated again, you absolute bollocks. But Mayo in general, to be honest with you, are probably the most impossible team to call. Lads, last season, Mayo were 20 minutes away from getting relegated, and then they ended up into a league final. I mean, how does that happen? How do you have a final day of a league season where a team is 20 minutes away from getting relegated and then end up in a league final? I mean, explain that to me. But that is the nature of madness that happens in Division 1 and everything else, and that is the nature of this competition. And in my opinion, it's why the National Football League is my most favourite competition, because you have absolute chaos and madness that happens absolutely across the board. Again, look, I think Mayo will be better this season than last season. One thing I would say as well, getting relegated from Division 1, not a big deal, in my opinion, because Mayo will come straight back up. I think Roscommon might do similar as well. And going down to Division 2, there's been a lot of teams who've been playing in Division 2 recently who've won All-Ireland. So, you know, if any Mayo fans are getting annoyed at me, I actually don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. And look, I think with Andy Moran coming in, he has to rotate. He has to try new things out, because I think relying on the same players in recent seasons, it just hasn't worked, in my opinion. Look, I think Aidan O'Shea was a lot, you know, gets a lot of unnecessary criticism. And I think he was actually very good for Mayo last season. I think he was one of their better players. But I think you have to look towards more younger players like Conal Dawson, Frank Irwin, Jack Coyne, Bob Toohey. You have to look towards some more younger players, because there hasn't been a huge amount kind of coming through. And I just think there will be a different system maybe that Mayo operate under Andy Moore. I think 2-pointers will be absolutely crucial as well. And look, Ryan O'Donoghue is a big player when it comes to 2-pointers. I think Jordan Flynn's very good as well. Seen James Carr's back in the squad, so that's absolutely huge from a Mayo perspective. Look, sometimes you can get similar that I mentioned with Roscommon. You can get a new manager, feel-good factor, a bounce. Something similar actually happened with Kevin McStay as well when he was Mayo manager. But look, ultimately, I have them with 5 points, so there'll be very little between it. I just think Monaghan on score difference might just edge it. And one of the main reasons being is because Monaghan are just the experts at doing that. And it is an interesting one with Monaghan, because every season I predicted them to get relegated. They would stay up and prove me wrong. The one season I predicted them to stay up, they got relegated. That's kind of usually how things work on this channel, actually, to be honest with you. Whatever I predict, usually the opposite happens. So maybe we'll have a Roscommon and Mayo League final now, given the fact that I've predicted them both to go down. But look, in terms of Monaghan, I think a big thing worth mentioning here, I think the Scottstown lads will come back in. Maybe not at the start, but the likes of Rory Began, Jack McCarron, Conor McCarthy. I do think players like Max Maguire and Tommy Mallon of Scottstown could come into the team potentially as well. You won't have Carl O'Connell, Darren Hughes, Killian Lavelle is injured, Kieran McNulty has gone travelling. So you are missing some big players there. There's no question in regards to that, but do you know what it is about Monaghan, lads? Like, they just know how to dig themselves out of this. They've done it so many times. You have players like Andrew Wood, Stephen O'Hanlon as well, Micheál Bannigan. In terms of their fixtures, I do think they'll beat Roscommon away. I think they'll beat Donegal at home, and they will draw with Mayo at home. The win versus Donegal will be on the final day as well. How many times have we saw Monaghan dig themselves out of it on the final day? And I think they'll do it again. Armagh's another interesting one as well. I've got them in 5th with 6 points. There's a part of me that does think as well, though, that Armagh could potentially get relegated. I mean, look, I think they'll only be a point. I mean, they're only a point away from 8th there in terms of Armagh. But I do think Armagh will do the bulk of their work at the start of the league, and it'll actually be towards the end of the league season, where they'll probably lose a couple of games, but never end up in 5th and end up looking like they nearly got relegated, but probably actually being fine. Is it Kieran McGeeney's last year? Possibly so. And I think, to be honest with you, I think Armagh will have a huge emphasis on Ulster and the All-Ireland. I think the league doesn't really matter too much for Armagh, to be honest with you. I don't think there'll be a huge amount of thinking in regards to the league. And I think we saw that with recent seasons as well. Like, you know, Armagh won the All-Ireland when they were in Division 2. I don't think the league has ever really been that big of a priority. I think getting up to Division 1 has been a priority, but I think after that, it hasn't been that important from an Armagh perspective. They're going to be missing big players. There's going to be no Stephen Campbell, Noel Grimley, Jamar Hall. Rian O'Neill has been ruled out of the league as well. Do still think we see Rian O'Neill come championship time at some stage, but he won't be involved in the league. We know that for sure. Rory Grugan is injured as well, I think, so that's going to be a huge blow. They still have good young players like Oisin Connaughty, Conor Turbot, Darren McMullen as well, and then Oisin O'Neill as well has been in phenomenal form actually in pre-season in the McKenna Cup, so he's definitely a player to come in. You've got Aaron O'Neill, Keema Conville maybe to come in. Look, in terms of their fixtures, I think they'll start the league actually quite strong. They've got Monaghan away, Galway home, Roscommon away, and Donegal home. I think they'll win 3 out of those 4 games. I think it will be Monaghan, Galway, and Donegal. But everything else will be a defeat. I think they'll lose to Roscommon. And then towards the end of the season as well, Mayo, Dublin, and Kerry. You know, I think Kerry will be ramping up their season going into Munster. Dublin will be doing similar as well. I think Mayo away is a little bit of a tricky match actually as well, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I think Armagh will be fine. They won't really ever have to worry too much about relegation. They might be looking over their shoulder a little bit. But I just think Armagh will have a big focus on bigger things this year. We've then got Dublin in 4th with 8 points. It is an interesting one with Dublin because when I suppose before doing the fixtures really, I was probably thinking that Dublin would actually edge closer towards relegation rather than potentially a league final. But look, I think Gerard Brennan coming in as a new manager, I think we never really took the league that seriously under Dessie Farrell. Like even when we got to the league final a couple of years ago, I didn't think we were particularly brilliant throughout a lot of that season. We actually lost the opening 2 games against Monaghan and Mayo, I remember that particular season. But I just think Gerard Brennan will want to instill the Dublin blueprint into this team. I think there will be a bit of a managerial bounce in there as well. And looking at Dublin in pre-season, I know we lost to Kildare recently, but I was impressed enough with us versus Laois. I still think there's a huge amount of quality within this Dublin team. You know, Dublin were not kicking for 2-pointers last year, which was bizarre because if there's a team to do it, you think it would be this Dublin team with Conor O'Callaghan, Cormac Costello, Kieran Kilkenny. And I would love to see the shackles let off this Dublin team this year. That's what I want to see from Dublin and Gerard Brennan. Let these players express themselves because under Dessie Farrell, it was far too system orientated. It was far too much passing the ball from side to side. Look, it got us the All-Ireland in 23, which was unreal, and fair play Dessie for that. But the game is evolved with the new rules, and we did not evolve with them last year at all. It looked like Dessie almost didn't even know there was new rules, to be honest with you, because we were so disinterested in terms of 2-pointers. Very hard to watch at times. I think goals will be a huge emphasis for Dublin as well. We saw that in particular with Louth last year when Gerard Brennan was managing them. And yeah, look, I like the look of some young players coming in. You know, the potential Kevin Stevenson, Robert Shaw both look good in pre-season. Niall O'Callaghan, I think, could be a big player this year as well. I think he could come in and play alongside his brother in Con. Look, there will be some players that will be held in reserve who've had injury issues. I don't think we'll see too much of Con throughout the entirety of the league. It is worth mentioning there'll be no John Small, and there won't be Stephen Cluxton as well because he is actually going to be in the management team this year. Luke Brecknock, I think, is a very good player. Killian McGuinness as well. I think we're well-rounded. We have a lot of options. And I think one thing that favours Dublin actually over some of the counties that are below them is the fixture list. So when you look at Dublin's fixtures, they have 4 home games and 3 away games. The away games are all coincidentally against the Connacht teams: Mayo away, Roscommon away, and Galway away. Their home games are Donegal, Monaghan, Armagh, and Kerry. I think our wins will come against Monaghan, Kerry, Roscommon, and I also think we'll lose on the final day versus Galway as well. But I think Dublin are in good steads, to be honest with you, going into this league. I don't think we'll get to a league final, but I think we'll be consistent enough, and I think those home games will be absolutely crucial. Then on third, we do have Galway. Galway is an interesting one, to be fair, because when I was doing the in-studio pod with the lads, I don't think a lot of them had Galway as high as I do have them here. I do think they'll beat Dublin on the final day, which is ultimately why I think Galway will finish above Dublin in terms of the head-to-head. It is an interesting one with Galway. It feels like the last year for Pádraig Joyce. It feels a little bit like now or never for Galway. They've lost a lot of big players as well. They've no Johnny Heaney, Tom O'Callaghan, Matthew Thompson as well won't be around. He's going on Erasmus. Shane Walsh and Damien Comer. I don't think you'll see too much of them in the league, to be honest. I don't think they'll be risked. And there is just question marks. They have a lot of older players like John Maher and a few others. Like you don't really know how, Paul Conroy, how much more are these lads going to give. I do like Killian O'Corrine. I think he's a very good player. who could make an impact for Galway. They do need silverware though, like they need something other than a Connacht Championship, don't they? Pushing towards maybe winning the league because they haven't won that, I think, since the 90s or something like that. So that'd be huge for Galway football to taste national silverware. But it does have that feeling of the last year for Pádraic Joyce, now or never. A lot of the players are getting on, there's no question. They do have young players as well, but it feels like a lot of the young players are stepping away. They are still a serious team when they're on their day, though, and they can, they will still be more than good enough, I think, to stave off relegation worries and certainly be closer towards pushing to the league final. In terms of their fixtures, they've Mayo. In terms of the games, I think they'll win. They'll beat Mayo at home. They'll beat Monaghan. They'll beat Dublin. I do think they'll draw with Roscommon and Donegal as well, though. Their only defeats will come to Kerry and Armagh away. The opening 3 games are huge, though, especially that opening game versus Mayo. Because, Mayo at home, big rivalry and everything else. If they lose that, they could be in a bit of trouble. But yeah, I'm going to go with Galway in third with 8 points. And then we move into the top 2, and I've got Donegal in second. Now, anyone who did watch the 2026 GA predictions video I did will know that originally I did think Galway would get into the final, but do you know what? Looking back through the fixtures and everything else, and looking at Donegal in particular, who I know in recent seasons have started the league very, very strong, and then ultimately faded a little bit towards the end and focus on Ulster and everything else. Their opening round in the Ulster Championship this time around is against Down, and they don't have the preliminary round game to worry about. So I think Donegal might actually be a little bit better in the league in terms of the ending of the league. I think they might actually still kind of turning on a little bit in regards to that. But look, there's no doubt Jim McGuinness year 3, the focus, of course, will be on the All-Ireland. I will say as well, I do have a feeling it could be Jim McGuinness's last year as well, because I don't think Jim McGuinness is there for the long term. I really don't. He wasn't there for the long term last time. I think he's coming in to try get that All-Ireland. If he wins it, I think he'll bounce. But even if he loses it, he might give it another year. But even another year, I'm not sure. I think he could bounce again, to be honest, because Michael Murphy, does he have another season after this? Maybe he does. Look, he was incredible last season. There's no question about that. But look, there will be rotation. There's no question about it. But one thing we know about Donegal and Jim McGuinness, they start the league every year like an absolute steam train, like a house on fire. And I think we'll see that again. They do have Oisin Gallen, Michael Langan, Finbar Rorty, a cornerback's very good. Conor O'Donnell's outstanding as well. I'm curious to see what young players they bring in, what new players, fresh faces they bring into the team, because that is something that Donegal have done every year. Paddy McBurty is retired. He wasn't starting really too much anyway. I don't think they'll miss him in the league as such, but I actually think maybe in the championship, that's where having a Paddy McBurty to come off the bench, I think, could really affect them. Oran Doherty, I think, will leave, has left the panel as well. So that'll be a blow. Are they a little bit light in midfield? That's what I'd worry about when it comes to Donegal. But look, in terms of their fixtures, I think they'll beat Dublin, they'll beat Kerry, they'll beat Mayo. I think they'll beat Roscommon as well. And then they'll draw with Galway on the third game from the end, which is ultimately how they end up with 9 points. I think they'll lose to Armagh and they'll lose to Monaghan on the final day. I think Armagh will just be raring to beat them given recent seasons. And Monaghan, I think, as I said, will pull off the great escape on the final day. Look, Donegal for me, they are, look, if you're ranking teams, if you're doing the power rankings, you would have to have Donegal second. Ulster champions, got to the final last year, but they still have a bit to improve on to catch the team above them, that is Kerry, in terms of not just the league, but the All-Ireland series. And yeah, I think for Donegal, I'll be very curious to see with them this season, because it's hard to know, can they go up higher than what they reached last season? It's hard to know. And then we do have Kerry in first. We'll save the best team for last. And much like what I was speaking about with Meath, look, I don't think anyone could call me biased here, because I predicted both my rivals to taste silverware in Croke Park in the league. You can't call me biased in any stretch of the imagination. Look, it is an interesting one with Kerry. They were a little bit inconsistent in the league last year, but still got to the final and won it. I think the same will happen again. Like, I think they'll win 5 games. I think they'll lose 2. I think they'll lose to Donegal away in the league phase. And I actually think they'll lose to Dublin as well. Dublin, for whatever reason, seem to have a great record against Kerry in recent seasons in the league. And I think we'll be able to do that again in Croke Park. And yeah, like I think their wins will come against Armagh, Mayo, Monaghan, and Roscommon and Galway. Be interesting to see with David Clifford. Does he feature in the early parts of the league? Usually he doesn't, but I do think he'll come back a little bit earlier than people expect, given the fact that Fossa didn't have a run in any club championships. People forget as well, they had injuries last season. So you have like Jeremy O'Connor to come back in. Like Paddy Clifford will be a lot more fit probably this season as well. You've got young players like Killian Trant, Cormac Dillon, Rory Murphy. They're in a brilliant place. And I think, like, as I said in my predictions video a couple of weeks ago, the blueprint for Kerry football and for Jack O'Connor has been winning the league. When they win the league, they win the All-Ireland. Like, it just seems to kind of, feed correctly into the, the feeling around the squad and everything else. And I think they'll do the same again. I think they will win the league. I do think they'll win the All-Ireland as well. I mean, going back to back is the interesting one with Kerry, isn't it? It's never happened with Jack O'Connor, and look, we'll save that for All-Ireland predictions and everything else. But I think Kerry will be too strong. Look, in a league final, if Donegal were playing their absolute best, you could maybe see Donegal winning that game, getting revenge and everything else. But again, I think Donegal will start looking ahead towards Ulster, and it would be the most vintage sort of Jim McGuinness thing ever to rest players. Donegal to get absolutely battered in the league final, to try and sort of get in the minds of the Kerry players, which I don't even think will happen anyway. But yeah, I think Kerry will win the National Football League for 2026. So there we go then. There are my predictions for the 2026 National Football League. It has been a long video, so if you have tuned in till this stage, very much appreciate it. If you could hit the like button and subscribe, that helps the channel out. As I said, very close to 6,000 subscribers. And yeah, looking forward to previewing the games. How it is actually going to work on the channel this year, I'm going to be doing my own individual previews on a Wednesday, so that'll be videos just myself running through the games, quick for National Football League. But then on Thursdays, it will be myself and the lads on Cooley Media predicting not just the football games, but the hurling games, camogie, ladies football, and everything. But Wednesdays will be an exclusive football show, so do stay tuned for that. And yeah, looking forward to cracking into the predictions, getting into the games, and yeah, it's great to have the ball back. So yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in. Speak to us all later.